then we have got Andy Taylor, Dr. Andy Taylor, who is going to do the prayer, and then Mr. Mandip Kundi is going to do the photo. After the prayer, I'll ask you to sit down.
Just like to read a short passage from the book of Philippians in the Bible. Always be full of joy in the Lord. I say it again, rejoice. Let everyone see that you are considerate in all you do. Remember, the Lord is coming soon. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. Let's pray. Father God, we come to you tonight as we approach this time of Christmas, when traditionally we remember peace on earth and goodwill towards men. Father, we want to pray that as not just a wishful thinking, but a reality, that we might know peace in our town at this time. I want to thank you, Lord, for all the officers of our town, both elected and employed. Thank you for the work that they do so much to make our town such a good place. And we do pray for them, Lord, at this time of Christmas, that there might be a time of peace and rest for every one of them. We pray too for those who are less fortunate. We pray for those who will be homeless this Christmas, those who will sleep rough. That, Lord, at this time, Christmas can be the worst time of year for them. But we pray, Lord, that actually you might touch them, touch their lives in some way that will bring joy, even in the midst of their hardship. We pray for those agencies who work so hard to help them and to look after them. We pray too for those who are lonely, live on their own, for whom, again, Christmas can be a very difficult time. And we pray that something of your presence and your peace will be upon them, that each one might know something of comfort and joy at this Christmas time. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Now, Mr. Mandip Kundi. Please sit down.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. When Mr. Mayor asked me about 3 or 4 days ago to come over and say something, I actually contemplated long and hard and thought, well,
Councillors, please.
What am I going to say? What will I tell everybody here? A lot of wise people with a great deal of wisdom and experience as well. So, you know, from my perspective, I just want to kind of get across to people some of my own thinking in reference to the way I've been raised in my life, really. One of the things I struggle with in my life constantly is trying to understand people around me. And I think we all kind of struggle with that to some degree. I often say to my son, who's 16 years old, I don't understand what you're saying. I don't understand what you're intending me to believe or understand. And we often have this quarrel about understanding each other. Yet, we're really good friends. And we know what each other's limitations are. But still, there is a lack of understanding. I often tell a little story to people about a gentleman who sits on a tube in the middle of rush hour in London. I'm pretty sure you all know what that's like to some degree. And another gentleman walks onto the train, smartly dressed, in a suit, with 3 children behind him. And they come and sit down in the train. And the gentleman A, me, probably, is sitting there attentively reading a newspaper. After a few stops, the gentleman who's come in a black suit, smartly dressed with these 3 children, starts to look down to the floor in disappointment to some degree. and his children start to cause a racket jumping on the seats. So I say to the gentleman, "Excuse me, sir, do you mind if you can control your children, because they're now disturbing me in my reading and my concentration?" And the gentleman looks back down after looking up at me and says, "Actually, yeah, you are right, I should," and then continues to look down to the floor. I then go back to the gentleman and say, "Excuse me, sir, you do really need to look after your children. Can I do something to help you?" And the gentleman looks up at me and says, "I should really do something about this. It's just that my wife passed away this morning and we've just come back from the funeral." And instantly your mind starts to shift from one perspective to another. And you start to think, actually, how did I not read that situation? How did I not try to understand the basic signs in life? A gentleman in the middle of the day, dressed in a black suit with children, 3 children on their own. There must be something different here. Yeah? So my word of the day for all of us, not just you, but all of us in life is, let's try and attempt to spend time to understand, deep and meaningful understanding. And in the same instance, to understand first by listening and then to be understood afterwards. Because too often enough do we spend more time trying to get everyone else to understand us first before we listen to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kundi. Right. Now, item number 1, fire evacuation procedures. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go down the back stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. To receive apologies for absence. Councillor Sanders.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, and Happy Christmas.
Thank you.
We have 3 apologies this evening from Councillor Robert Taylor, from Councillor Stephen Peach, and from Councillor Terry Reid. And members may be aware that her husband, former Councillor Stephen Reid, was taken into hospital last week and has had to have an operation to have his gallbladder removed. He was in the high dependency unit earlier on today, but I gather is progressing well and is being an absolute pain in the arse to all the people around him. So things look fairly good for the future. But I'm sure we'd all join together and wish him well.
Apologies for Councillor David Eyre.
Councillor Gavin James.
Apologies for Councillor Brian Gurdon, Councillor Steve Day, and possibly Councillor Eric Dunlop, who's trying to get here, but we're not sure he's going to make it.
Thank you. Declaration of interests. Yes, Councillor Lee.
Leaks, yeah. I declare a pecuniary interest on paper B, and I will leave the room.
Noted. Councillor Jones.
Thank you. On many down, I've got a peculiar interest if it's being debated at any time, so I shall leave the chamber. Thank you.
Councillor Lake.
Oops. I'm advised that I may have a pecuniary interest in motion, whatever it is. No, sorry, item 10.1, but I still intend to speak. Thank you.
Councillor Donnell.
I may have a interest for the counter-tax support grant, as my wife is a civil servant at DWP. However, she can't tell me what she's working on because she's politically neutral, so I don't know.
Councillor Marks.
Mr. Mayor, I'm led to believe it may be 10.1 and 12.2 I have an interest in. Thank you.
Councillor Round.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, pecuniary interest in the council tax discretionary discounts. I own some properties in the borough.
Thank you. Councillor Hussey.
Possible pecuniary interest in 10-1.
Councillor Bound.
Ditto, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mrs. Taylor.
Thank you. I've been advised that as a landlord I also have to declare an interest in paper B. Thank you.
Anything else? No. Thank you. It's all noted. Thank you. Item 5, to confirm the minutes of meeting held on 10th of October 2013. Is that agreed? Agreed. Now, to receive any announcement from myself and the Chief Executive. Chief Executive hasn't got any. I have got a few announcements. The first one is Chris Guy, our head of governance, has retired on grounds of ill health with effect from 31st of October. Chris worked in local government for 31 years. 25 of which were at Basingstoke and Dean. Chris joined us as a principal solicitor and then increased his management responsibilities to include first committees, then licensing, before becoming head of governance around 2 years ago. Chris was instrumental in creating the shared legal service with Hart. He was always willing to help a colleague, and I know many staff and members will miss his ready advice. The second one is I reiterate about Stephen, and I wish him full recovery. The third one is I requested that the Union flag be flown half-mast in memory of a remarkable and true human being, President Nelson Mandela. And lastly, I would like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and invite you all to join me for a drink after this council meeting. Item 7, public participation, I have got none. Item 8, resignation and appointment. Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Change to Economic Performance Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Stuart Parker to come off and Councillor Brian Gurdon to go on.
Any more? No. So that's noted. Item number 9 is petition. Sorry?
Councillor James. Outside bodies.
Outside bodies. Any?
Councillor James, Councillor James.
Yes. Councillor Sanders.
There's a number which I think are due, Mr. Mayor. I don't know how you wish to take this, whether you wish to take them one by one or for us to give you a long list. I was going to start with Carl of the Arts.
Yeah.
And Councillor Mrs. Taylor would like to stay on as Carl of the Arts. If that's agreed, yes. Probably. In which case, the next one is the CVC Children's Partnership, and it's not really down to me because we didn't have anybody we want to put forward, but I could always ask if Councillor Harvey would like to stay on. In the spirit of Christmas.
Councillor Harvey? All right. Now, Councillor Laura James.
Mr. Mayor, we have nominations for the local children's partnership, so I'm happy to give those now if you'd like. And so we're looking at the CVC partnership, and that's Councillor Harvey. And we're also looking at the partnership for the ABC partnership, and that's David Eyre. And the EFH partnership, and that's Viv Washbourne, Councillor Viv Washbourne.
Is that agreed? Yeah? No, we got that nomination. Right. Councillor.
Hold on. Can we deal first of all? Can we take the CVC first? The only nominations, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah.
Mayor, that's what you need to do. You take the
CVC first, yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
Do it now. The only nominations, Councillor Harvey.
Well, we got only one nomination for CVC, which is Councillor Harvey. Is that agreed? Lovely. So that's done away.
Now take nominations for the ABC partnership.
Now this, Councillor Keating.
If I may, my recollection is relatively short, but it's not so short as the last moment or two, when you asked, was that agreed? For all three of them?
No, I was told no. Councillor Keating,
Doesn't matter
that's
whether
why I'm taking it in order.
It doesn't matter whether people don't agree or not. It was agreed by a majority at the time.
Please sit down. Yeah, next one is...
Right. ABC, you have a nomination for Councillor Eyre. Ask for any other nominations.
ABC.
Okay. Open your agenda.
Yeah.
Take ABC partnership. You have a nomination for Councillor Eyre.
Now we have got a nomination for Councillor Ayres for ABC partnership. Are there any other nominations? Yes, Councillor Sanders.
Sorry, I would like to nominate Councillor Mrs. Terry Reid.
Are there any other nomination? Can I put that to the vote? First for Councillor Ayres. Is that seconded first? Yeah. You done?
Yep, fine.
Yeah. Councillor Terry Reid.
Silly Councillor. Councillor Mrs. Reid.
Councillor Mrs. Reid has it.
Now.
Now the next one is Basingstoke Rural Partnership.
Saunders.
Councillor Saunders.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Mrs. Ostleton, Mr. Mayor.
Any other nomination? No. Is that agreed? Right.
Okay, now EFH.
Now we come to EFH partnership. Councillor Washbourne has been nominated. Any other nomination? Councillor Sanders?
Nominate Councillor Donnell.
Donnell. Is that seconded? Seconded.
Now it goes to vote. Any other nominations?
No. Has Councillor Washbourne been seconded? Yeah. Good. Any other nomination? No. So that goes to a vote. So Councillor Washbourne. Yeah. Yes. Now, Councillor Donnell. Yeah, that's clearly carried. Councillor Donnell. Councillor Donnell has it. Right.
Mr. Account, the Laura James has asked for the voting numbers.
Voting numbers? Yes, can we announce the voting numbers?
Yes, it was 21 for Councillor Mrs. Washbourne and 27 for Councillor Donnell.
Mr.
Yes,
Mayor,
Councillor Gavin James.
I'd like to nominate Keith Watts to the Whitchurch Youth Centre Trust.
Sorry?
So, over the page.
Sorry. Yes, yes.
Last page, turn over.
Yeah.
Is that agreed?
Is that agreed? Oh, lovely, thank you. I didn't look. Okay, now petitions, none received. Number 10 is reports to the council. The first one is council tax discretionary discount for unoccupied properties. Any declaration of interest? Yeah, it's done. Yeah, it's done that. So we go to the main agenda.
No, you asked someone to introduce it with the
Yeah. Can we have Councillor, is it Isaac, to introduce this?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor. As you say, this is a report on the...
Wait a minute, we have got... would you... Councillor Marks, carry on. Yes, Councillor Isaac.
Yes, I'm rather disappointed I haven't got a conflict of interest here, or pecuniary interest. But, there we go, I'll have to do better in life. This is a report on the discretionary aspects of council tax, and it is a continuation of the council policy we adopted last year, which has bedded in very well, and therefore we're recommending that it should continue for another year.
Councillor Laura James.
Thank you. We welcome this proposal, which many of us have called for over many years, and we think that this paper suggests the right way forward over the next year. The report demonstrates the success of the policy and the change which has resulted in the reduction of the number of empty homes, and we welcome this and we think this is the way forward. And clearly, I know there was lots of concerns from the members opposite regarding this policy, but it just demonstrates the success, and thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones. Councillor?
No, Councillor John.
Oh.
John. No, Councillor Laura James.
Councillor John Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I've already said, I'm advised that I may have a pecuniary interest because my wife lets a property in the borough, although I have to say it is in good order and not in need of long-term repair, and there's been no void period since 2006. That does not stop me speaking on this subject in previous years, and it will not stop me tonight. I've said on all previous occasions that council tax is raised to cover the cost of providing services to residents. Empty properties, for whatever reason, have no residents by definition. I see no reason, therefore, in council tax being levied on the owners of such properties, and I also believe that for second homes, which I should say we do not have, there should be a significant discount to reflect the reduced level of service. If residents want to leave properties empty, they should be allowed to do so, and without paying council tax. This policy is not logical, but based on envy. I'm surprised no one has suggested that the Inland Revenue be allowed to assess tax on the notional rental income on an empty property, but maybe I'm giving you too many ideas. If I could, I would be voting against, but as I'm the only one in step on this policy and my vote would be wasted, I shall abstain. Thank you.
Nobody else?
Is that agreed? Right.
Now, could my abstention be recorded? Thank you.
Yes.
And your interest.
And your interest. Thank you, Councillor John Lee. Now, item number 2, Council Tax Support Scheme for Basingstoke and Dean 2014-15. Councillor Eaches.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just move the recommendation as tabled in the paper. There's no change to last year, save for the removal of second adult rebate.
Councillor Laura Jane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We welcome the administration's change in position on this from last year, and we see the default option as the right decision for the thousands of households affected. We spoke passionately about this last year, and I know others in the chamber did too. So the decision this year is the right one. We want to see the default option continue. Thank you.
Anybody else? Is there anybody else wish to speak? No. Is that agreed? Agreed. Lovely. Now we come to 10.3 Members Allowance Scheme 2014-15. We have an amendment. Yes, Councillor Laura Jane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Labour Group believe, as we have done consistently for the last 2 years now, that allowances should be frozen for 3 years. We do not support linking staff wages with councillor allowances. We spoke against this last year and we still oppose it. When this was presented to group leaders for noting, the proposal from SMT was that 20 senior staff of this council on grade 11 and above would not get the 1% rise, but all other staff will. So which group of staff are you linking your allowances to tonight? We want to see a freeze, and therefore we do not support the 1% increase. That is the simple intention of our amendment, and we urge you to support that.
Seconded by Councillor Tilbury.
Is that seconded by Councillor Tilbury? Yes. Councillor Tilbury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm very happy to second that amendment. I've generally had concerns with this over many years and didn't support the changes last year. The idea that we should roll this on year and link it to staff wages. We're not staff, we're not employees, and I don't think we should be sort of linked in that way. And I think the point that Councillor James made about the sort of the senior management are not going to get an increase or whatever, or the group, and we assume that's who it is. It doesn't actually state this in here, but I know the government sort of tried to put pressure on senior management. Certainly, I think Eric Pickles has tried to sit on them, but which is a rather worrying analogy, I think. But I mean, and I think this is the point. If you look at it, if this was a business, you know, they're the management, we're like the board of directors. So I think we should at least share their pain in that respect, because at the end of the day, they're doing it. That's their job. They're employed to do it. That, you know, we're not employees. We, you know, we're supposed to do this. We're volunteers. We chose to do it. We actually stood for election. So I also have a long-standing concern about the special responsibility allowances, which I've always thought were too high, and I've always argued that case with the independent remuneration panel. I mean, I had some success. They have sort of not put some of them up, or did reduce some there. But so in principle, I can't support it anyway, because, you know, if I think those allowances are too high, increasing them by 1% isn't going to make the situation better, is it? So the other argument, you know, often answered that we, you know, if you give more money, we need more money to give the council to attract the right people. Well, I've not noticed that work that well in industry. It certainly doesn't work that well in banking, does it? In those sort of businesses. So, and at the end of the day, if you look at the special responsibility allowances, obviously the way they're divvied up at the moment, they seem to always go to whoever's in power. So that's clearly not necessarily the best people. So the system isn't very good, and I certainly can't support increasing the amount. I mean, if you work at it, it isn't actually that amount of money, but it's a matter of principle, I think, in these straitened times. Because the other issue is, of course, is where's this money going to come from? We're not increasing the council tax, so we're not generating more income anywhere necessarily. So, but we're going to pay ourselves 1% more. I think most people find that a bit of an odd situation. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This amendment was all too predictable. We discussed it in the group before it was even made. It will no doubt confuse the public that the party that was offended by the 1% increase to benefits being too low, that's bemoaned the 1% increase to key worker salaries and spent the last 12 months grumbling about how wages have not kept pace with the cost of living, are now arguing that a 1% increase is too much. The only consistent thing about the Labour group is their inconsistency. There are good reasons why the council agreed to link their pay award to that of other staff. It would be easy for someone to move an amendment proposing no increase. Someone else could propose a cut of 20%, and before the night is over, we are left questioning why we get any allowance at all. The reason is simple. There are sacrifices we make in becoming councillors. Whilst your colleagues are studying to secure the next promotion, you're reading Arga trying to work out what language it's written in. While your business rivals are networking, you're sitting on the tree shading panel. We can all afford those sacrifices as we receive an allowance. The more that allowance is diminished, the more councillors and potential councillors are priced out of taking an active role in our local democracy. That is an unhealthy situation. Only the most arrogant would argue that we have not reached that point yet. We know little of the personal financial circumstances of everyone in this chamber, even less about those who may wish to join us. I want a council where the bankers and bin men are equally welcome, where the unemployed and retired are welcome, where the social worker and teacher are welcome, and where lawyers are allowed. Not everyone here is retired with a big final salary pension scheme or earning an income from a second home. Some have children to look after and can only be a councillor whilst an allowance is paid. I would have thought none of us would want to risk the diversity of this chamber or the future of our democracy just to score cheap political points. The second reason I'm not against an increase is I'm actually proud of what we do. I look around my ward and see good things that I've helped make happen. I see less good things that could have been worse had I not been involved, and there are bad things I'm working on. Is it any wonder local election turnout is so low when we go through this annual debate telling our residents we're not worth it? Mr Mayor, there'll be many in this chamber thinking a few extra £1,000 that we would save by not increasing our allowances could be better used in the community. Well, of course, it still can. Those of us who don't need the extra £50 can support local community groups. The council set the allowance, they don't tell you what you have to spend it on. Mr Mayor, I don't care about if you don't care about representative democracy, then back the Labour amendment. If you don't think you're worth your money, that you're good enough as a councillor, then back the Labour amendment. If you don't support doing good work in the local community, then back the Labour amendment. I would ask everyone else to show leadership, pride and vote against the amendment and support the substantive proposal. And I would ask, as tonight we're going to find out which councillors don't think they're worth it, that we should have a recorded vote.
Thank you. Councillor Bierman.
Well, clearly the whipping isn't working in the independent forum. So I'll put an alternative case, which is similar to Councillor James. I did a bit of a survey today. I was in a forum where there were quite a lot of members of the public. And since this is so topical nationally as well as in our chamber here tonight, I sort of queried how people felt about possible increases. And the general thrust of the response was, well, anything up to 3%, looking at RPI and things like that, is quite acceptable. Suggestion of 1%, there was absolutely no hint of any concern about that being unreasonable. To my mind, you've got to link it to some, if you accept that the value of the allowance isn't going to evaporate altogether, you've got to link it to something. I don't agree with my colleague here that we are not altogether in the same boat as officers. I think we're part of the same team. I'm quite happy to accept that the chief executive doesn't get any more because he gets more than 100 grand, and I think 100 grand's enough for anybody. And so that's where again the argument with my colleague falls apart, because yes, people, I don't think good people need more than 100 grand to be attracted, but I do think good people do need a certain amount of subsistence if they don't have means of their own to do their council work. And there is a cost in being a councillor. I'm a self-employed person, for instance, and whilst I'm doing my council work, I am not employing myself. I am not earning money. And whilst it's not a fortune that we get as allowance, it is a little recognition of the fact that a lot of my time that I could be used to earn an income for my family, and my family do remind me of how much time I waste on council activities, I think I owe it to them to have the reassurance of a certain basic income. So for that reason, I shall support the 1%. I have no shame in doing so, but in so doing, I will certainly concur with my colleague that the special responsibility allowances are in some cases quite bizarre and in most cases too much. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I should make it clear that as a group, we don't have a position on this. We believe that matters of remuneration for councillors and matters associated with the council should be a subject for individual members to make up their own minds. And so I'm not speaking as the stand-in leader this evening of the Conservative group or the leader of the council. This is purely my position on this. And I have to say that I rather agree with the two previous speakers. I think there is a potential danger that if we do not at least move the allowances along, we're still a long way away in our allowances from those that were recommended by an independent assessment panel. But at least if we move them along a bit, we will keep them relatively attractive to people who might otherwise think they cannot come and be a councillor. And there is a cost of being a councillor. And I would hate to see that we finished up just having a council full of the retired, the self-employed, the unemployed, or the unemployable. If you're a fairly young person, to give up time, which you won't get, you have to give up free time or take your holiday, that's a very major imposition on your own style of life, particularly if you've got a young family to look at the same time. So I think it would be wrong to peg allowances as they are. I think in the future, at some point, we are going to have to grapple with this issue of moving allowances towards the level that the independent assessor said they should be at. What's the point of having an independent assessment if you don't listen to what they say? Our MPs seem to have got themselves completely into a stew, and from all parties over this one, and unnecessarily. We don't want to make the same shambles about ours. So we do need to have a progress at some point in time. Now probably is not the right time to start making major steps forward, but we should at least make one small step forward, which was the original proposal. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It just pained me to hear speakers from the two coalition parties to speak about how they got to have an increase into their allowances when public sector pay has been frozen consistently since the last 3 or 4 years. And the public out there who look to us, even the private sector has been grossly affected. I'll be speaking about this later, don't worry. It'd be a slap in their face. I mean, I'm not going to use the word like hard-working families, you know, living wage crisis, what the politicians centrally talk about. People are struggling out there, and they're going to look around to us and, at this time here at Christmas, think we're awarding ourselves a pay increase. Even if it's 1%, it's 1% more than what other people get. But having said that, I would support the amendment. But having said that, of course, the point that the leader said and the leader of the Liberal Democrats said is quite right, and we have to attract people through. I was once elected to this council for the first time as a mere youngster of 45, and I was working then with a young family. No, I was a student. Sorry, then I was working with a young family, and it always worried me then. I think the allowance was about £100 a month or something in them days, and I was always in favour of having a good allowance system. So it needs to be looked at sometime in the future, but there's never a right time. But in the middle of coming out of a deep recession, it's not the right time to award ourselves a pay increase. Just as our the MPs are about to find out. Actually, you can't award yourself great increases like that. It's 11% or 1% when everybody else is having pay cuts, just hang on to their jobs. So I would say yes, we will have to look at this sometime in the future, but now it's not the right time.
Thank you, Councillor Raphael.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I take the view that Councillor James and Councillor Bierman have spoken sense, and Councillor Sanders here has also speaks sense. The background to this, and I remember sitting in a meeting with Councillor Harvey, and we discussed this. This was some years ago, and we said it's got to go to an independent review body. So we agreed, let's go, because we didn't want to be having this annual vote. Because we took the view that if an independent body said it was too high or too low, then that was out of our hands and we wouldn't then start playing politics. But every year ever since, unfortunately, the Labour group have tried to play politics with it. And we postponed putting into place the incremental increase that was suggested, and we did vote, I suspect, for good reason. And now last year we agreed that it should be raised in line with the staff wages, and that seemed to make sense to us then. But then, of course, guess what? Labour Party wants to change their position again. What we have to think about is the economic realities of Basingstoke and Deane as a borough. This increase will not affect our residents because the council tax is frozen, and with any luck it will continue to be frozen. So the cost is not passed on to them. That's the first point. Secondly, we live in one of the best run boroughs in the country. There's no doubt about that. So it's not as though we've got huge debts or we've got staff crisis or anything like that. So we're in one of the best run boroughs in the country. We've got one of the lowest council taxes in the country. So it's not as though we should be reducing our council tax rather than spending our money on this. And we live, as we know, in one of the best places in the country, because we all agree on that without a doubt. And so when we live in an area that has a successful and thriving economy that is on the way up, without a doubt, now, why can't we pay ourselves a fair and proper allowance? And that's what's been determined independently. And why can't that be incrementally increased? And Councillor Sanders quite properly points to the mess the members of Parliament have got themselves into constantly because they're scared of their own shadows. And at last we've got some sensible councillors in this chamber who are going to say, well, we're not going to get ourselves into that pickle. We're going to stop this merry-go-round every year where they go, oh, you're voting yourself more money. Oh, you don't deserve it. Well, actually, I think we do try our best in this chamber from all sides. And some of you on that side make tremendous sacrifices. I know that. Some of you do. And you may well not have great incomes. You may have great incomes. I don't know, and that's not for me to know. But you make those sacrifices. So why are you caning yourself over this? It's not as though it's going to help one single resident in this borough by doing it. It's just so that you can make some political points in some magazine that you hope someone will read at some point. Bonkers. And I want to speak up for the 35 to 55-year-olds, because I'm in the middle of that section. It's the 35 to 55-year-olds, I suspect, and you may want to tell me about your sacrifices if you fall outside that bracket. But it's the 35 to 55-year-olds who have the biggest pressures upon them, I suspect. If you're fortunate to be in a relationship and have a family, you know that there are others who will say to you, but you're taking time off to do this or you're taking time off to do that. And they don't appreciate it. Not all of the time, believe it or not. And if you could at least say to them, well, at least I get some money coming in for the late nights I'm not at home to help with the family. That does help. And we are the section, the 35 to 55-year-olds, who could be spending our time working hard in our professional lives to do well for our families. But we've made a choice not to do that, but to spend some of our time working hard for the residents of this borough. And that, incrementally over a period of time, has quite an effect on our careers. And I dare say you know that, because you've made that sacrifice yourselves. When you say to your boss, I've got to go home early. And they say, why? And you can't take the call because you're in a meeting like this. You know that. But incrementally, at our age group, it is a big sacrifice. And of course, we are the 35 to 50-year-olds who get taxed more. We always do.
And second.
And therefore, I say, Mr. Mayor, to the councillors, please vote for this. And don't vote for their amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Cubitt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as a fact check, because I just looked up on the internet. Since 2010, the coalition government did have a freeze for 2 years on anyone earning 21 grand and over. But after the 2-year cap, the pay rises on public sector are 1% per annum. So it is in line with what is happening in the public sector.
Thank you. Now I'll call on Councillor James to sum up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. it disturbs me really that we're talking about our merit and whether we, whether we are worthy, and talking about us in relation to our performance as councillors tonight. It's nothing to do with that. It's not about, we're not into performance-related pay as to whether we deliver a good council or not. It isn't about that. We, on this side, we're always concerned about the link between staff and pay and allow a councillor's pay. And we think that's a dangerous way to go. We've consistently said that we would like to see a 3-year freeze. I think that in relation to what's happening in the country, the austerity, and it's been said tonight about the economic reality of Basingstoke. Well, the economic reality of Basingstoke is that we've got people using food banks. We've got people that are going to go hungry, that are going to go cold this Christmas. So that's the economic reality of a lot of people in Basingstoke. It might not be the economic reality of lots of people on the other side of the chamber, but that's the economic reality that we're seeing. But what we're concerned about is also that you said you wanted to link this to pay. Well, there's 20 members of this staff, of this council, who are not going to take a pay increase, are not going to get the 20%. So do you link it to those who are going to get it, or those who are not going to get it? And as those people that lead this council, I would have thought if you're going to link it to anyone's staff, any staff, it's those leaders of the council, and they're not taking a pay increase. But you're deciding, no, we're going to link it to the ones that are not those senior management team. We're going to link it to those that are going to get the 1%. Well, that's your choice, and you can do that. But Councillor Bierman says tonight that the people out there are very happy for him to get a 3% increase. Well, the reality is that people in our ward will not see that favourably. They do not see that. When many people are going without pay or actually unable to get work, they're actually having to take pay freezes, they're not going to look at it favourably. And so I urge you to think about that. This is about sending a message that we understand. We're not in work. This is not work. This is an allowance for what we're doing. And I think it's really important that we send a very clear message. I think it's also important that we send a message to those 20 members of staff. That if you're not going to get your pay, your 1%, we won't get it. I think it's really important that we send a message of solidarity to those 20 members of staff, that we support you. And we're in this together. We're in this together with them. Isn't it your leader that talks about being in it together? Well, I'm in it with that 20 members of staff, and I won't be taking that 1%.
Thank you. Now I put the amendments to the vote, which is going to be recorded. So, Chief Executive.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Mayor, yes, there was a request for recorded vote, so it's for and against or abstain on the amendment. Councillor Mrs. Baker. Councillor Barnes. For. Councillor Miss Bean. Councillor Bierman. Councillor Bound. Councillor Mrs. Burgess. Councillor Ms. Cherrett. Councillor.
Please. No. No, please. Councillors. So, order, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. More unfortunately, sport the symmetry of our paper here, but there we are. Councillor Ms. Cherrett. Councillor Mrs. Court. Councillor Cousins. Councillor Mrs. Cubitt. Councillor Donnell. Councillor Ms. Eachus. Councillor Finney. Councillor Mrs. Frankham. Councillor Frankham. Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gosden. Councillor Golding. Councillor Harvey. Councillor Hood. Councillor Hussey. Councillor Isaac. Councillor Ms. James. Councillor James. Councillor J. Wardner. Councillor Jones. Councillor Keating. Councillor Leek. Councillor Leeks. Councillor Marks. Councillor Miller. Councillor Mitchell? Councillor Musson? Councillor Mrs Ossleton? Councillor Parker? Councillor Potter? Councillor Putty? Abstain. Councillor Regan? Councillor Round? Councillor Raffel? Councillor Sanders? Councillor Shaw? Councillor Sherlock? Councillor Mrs Still? Councillor Mrs Taylor? Councillor Tilbury? Councillor Tomlin? Councillor Mrs Tucker? Councillor Ms Washbourne? Councillor Gary Watts? Councillor Keith Watts? Councillor Mrs Waldridge? Thank you.
Okay. Chief Exec.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. For 17, against 30, abstentions 5. So the amendment is lost.
So now with a substantive motion, is that agreed? Agreed. Come to the fourth appointment of monitoring officer interim arrangement. Is that agreed? Agreed. Now to receive the following recommendations from licensing held on 20th of November 2013. Is that Councillor? Yeah, Mrs. Taylor. Councillor Eaches.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is just for the Chamber to approve the licensing policy. This is a whole new policy. It's not an amendment to our last policy. This has been through consultation. It has been through Ofcoms, and I'm pleased to confirm it's had cross-party support. And I would really like to take this opportunity to thank Linda Cannon and her team of officers in licensing for all the hard work that's been put into this. Because like I said, it isn't just an amendment to an existing policy. It's a whole draft of a whole new policy, and it really sets out where this council wants to go as far as licensing and late night drinking. And I hope that we can all approve it like we did in the Ofcoms together. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that all agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Now we come to the Cabinet held on 3rd of December. Treasury Management Media Report. Councillor Isaac.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a report that covers the Council's Treasury Management through to 30th September 2013 and includes forecasts for the year ended 31st of March 2014, and we recommend the report to Council.
Agreed? Agreed. Yeah, item B has been dealt with earlier this year. Right. Now we come to the notice of motions. First one is Councillor Cousin, living wage.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, it gives me pleasure to propose this motion tonight because it gives us the chance as a council to lead the curve on a debate rather than follow the example set out. So the motion asks for us to implement the living wage as the minimum level for our council and employees. And in our investigations, I'm pleased to say that with the exception of apprentices, there is nobody who is paid underneath the living wage. So that as a base point, I hope we can all agree on that we could implement that as a baseline. And we won't be the first council to do that. There are several other councils who are doing this and bringing it forward. The GMB released a statement that 83 councils are either implementing or in the process of implementing them. And Mr Mayor, they're not all Labour councils, they are a mixture of councils. For example, Oxford is implementing, Brighton and Hove is implementing, Winchester, York, Melton Mowbray, Sheffield. We can join this small group of people and say that yes, we believe in the living wage, and we believe that it is a fair day's work for a good day's fair day's pay for a good day's work. And Mr Mayor, it's not just these councils that are doing it. Prominent political figures are suggesting the living wage. People who have aspirations on number 10, and I'm not talking about the Deputy Leader. I'm talking about the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson believes in the living wage. So, I mean, that's a token for the members opposite, that someone who's as prominent in their party as him believes in the living wage. Then it's something I hope that we can all get behind and action. But the motion doesn't just look at what we can do in-house. It also looks at what we can do to become a living wage town. And we currently have employers in Basingstoke who pay the living wage. Barclays pay the living wage. I mean, there are aspects as well of the CAB, not yet here in Basingstoke. It's something that I hope we can do. But the CAB in York pay the living wage. It's something that I'd like to see our CAB do. And it's what the motion asks us to do. It asks us to take this to ARGA and to EPP to see what we can do to not only encourage our partners and our contractors to pay the living wage, because we believe that's the right thing to do, but also what can we do to encourage businesses in our town to pay the living wage? And if they do that, what benefits could we give back to them? It's a two-way street. And we all can see that we want our town to be economically superb and superior to every other council. This motion helps us get there. It's something that I think we should do, and I hope that we can get cross-party support for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to... sorry, Chair. My apologies, Mr Mayor. I'm pleased to second this motion because, as I touched on earlier, the wages have declined significantly over the last, well, you could say last 30 years, but they've accelerated in decline over the last 5. That's why New Labour introduced, in the face of Tory opposition, a minimum wage, which is now, was in the end not opposed by the Tories, but they tried to kill it by stealth. And that's proved because the coalition now with the Lib Democrats have now reduced the value in the minimum wage by 10%. Additionally, the real value of wages have declined since the bankers' crash in 2007 to 2008 by 15%. And this is making the workers pay for the bankers' crisis, and it would not of our making. The decline of trade unions has also contributed to the reduction in wages values.
Councillors, please listen.
Well, they can carry on if they want.
When somebody is speaking.
They're not showing me disrespect, are they? Not you. I mean, I did film 11 plus, so I know Boris won't like me very much. But yeah, the decline of trade unions has actually accelerated the decline in wage values, and that's obviously an intention of the previous Tory governments and this one with the Liberal Democrats. It's an advancement in neoliberalism. In the face of the crisis, wage values, as we say, have declined, and I would suggest that we do away with the minimum wage and have a living wage, a statutory, at the required rates of £7.65 at the moment for out of London and £8.80 for inner London, but that's for another argument. In fact, you know, wages have been, as I say, have been declining over 30 years anyway, under neoliberalism since the early 80s, but that's a historical fact. Living wage would obviously, if the introduction of a living wage at that rate would reduce welfare benefits without a bedroom tax and Ian Duncan Smith, and also, and it would also increase people's spending power and stimulate the economy. It'd be fair to all employers because it would put a foot in wage levels. There'd be no race to the bottom. It's required in Basingstoke because this council, as we know, under another 10% cut in the autumn statement, it can be rushing to outsource and privatise. So this, having a living wage, would protect not only the core staff's terms and conditions, but it also would protect those contractors. So that's why I support it. So the coalition now, formed without a mandate to save capitalism from itself, drive down wages, cut welfare, privatise public services, increase profits at the expense of the workers. This is neoliberalism, and we reject it. A living wage would combat that. So the poorest pay for the price for the national crisis, not of their making, and the failure of this coalition government. The season of goodwill, that's the season of goodwill. I will wish you Merry Christmas-ish. So I say to the Liberals, show some redemption for your betrayal of social progress since you're forming the coalition, and the Tories can demonstrate that they get the spirit of Dickens' Christmas Carol. Vote for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Isaac.
Thank you very much. In my view, this is a well-intentioned motion.
Please listen.
But misguided, and one that the consequences of implementing would ultimately be harmful and potentially the reverse of what was intended. If compassion was the only consideration we needed to have as councillors responsible for the finances of Basingstoke and Deane, it would indeed be a wonderful world, but sadly and realistically it isn't. And our finances wouldn't be in the good shape they are in. It is good that as a council we are able to afford to pay our staff well. This is above the figure labelled by its supporters as the living wage, in all cases except, for appropriate reasons, our apprentices, who are paid in excess of the national minimum wage rate for apprentices. What is potentially damaging about this motion, however, is the idea that we should seek to impose this minimum wage level on those businesses and voluntary groups bidding for contracts from us. To do so will risk inflicting unsupportable higher costs on some of our suppliers and, as an indirect result, on ourselves and our ratepayers via higher tender prices. Contracts with us may form a small but important part of a supplier's overall business, but we would be dictating to them that they should nevertheless accept this extra cost, not only for our work, but for the work they do for others. The government would, of course, benefit, taking half of any increase in higher tax revenues, NI, and lower benefit and tax credit payments. Perhaps this is one of the objectives of the motion. Those organisations who have signed up to the living wage have done their sums beforehand and have decided that the benefits outweigh the costs. But should we pressurise those who haven't to pay more? Might this not put jobs at risk? Would this have a knock-on effect and cause escalating pay claims from those employees already at or above the living wage? We have the statutory national minimum wage already in place as a safety net. It has risen faster than average earnings since it was introduced in 1999, and twice as fast as inflation. I do not think that it is the role of this council to interfere with how other organisations run their businesses and insist on them rewarding their employees above the safety net of the national minimum wage. For these reasons, I will not be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Jayawardena.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank the opposition for their motion. They raise an interesting point, but I fear that once again the point has actually been missed and the facts not quite understood. I must therefore disagree with the fundamentals that drive this motion, that the economy is to blame and that people are not being paid enough. I would of course agree wholeheartedly that people having more cash in their back pocket is a good thing and an imperative part of the economy's continued recovery. And this motion talks about the rise in the cost of living. Yes, some bills have gone up. Energy, for instance, thanks to the past government and the former Energy Secretary, who's now their leader, who said at the time, there are upward pressures on energy bills, and that makes life difficult for people, including those in fuel poverty, and yet he still continued to exacerbate it. It's this government, this coalition government, that's sorting out that mess and tackling the cost of living. If you'll indulge me, energy bills down £160 a year because we're getting people onto the lowest tariff. £1,000 saved on mortgages because rates have been kept low. £360 saved on petrol if you fill up your car once a week. £400 off childcare bills by increasing free education and care for 3 and 4-year-olds. And a £590 cut in income tax for the typical taxpayer. Locally, we've followed the same approach. Residents have had their council tax frozen since 2010, and we're proposing another 2-year freeze. If Labour were running the council, people's bills would be nearly 13% higher following their past record. The Conservatives believe in keeping bills down, whereas Labour just want to tax, borrow and spend. The coalition was formed to shore up the economic mess left by Labour's borrowing. There's a lot further to go. We have a long-term plan to take the economy forward, and we've begun to turn a corner. You see, this motion is fundamentally incorrect. Incomes have actually been rising. And don't just take my word for it. Don't just take my word for it. Reuters, an independent market analysis source, said...
Councillor Jayawardena, please. They listen to you courteously, and all sides, I would like you all to listen each other courteously without much of that high comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The opposition may heckle, but they're perhaps afraid of the facts, because Reuters, an independent market analysis source, said of incomes, wages in Britain grew at their fastest rate in 6 years during November. I see no mention of that in their doomsday analysis. So not only are they content with increases to bills while we're keeping bills down, but they're also talking down the economy at the very moment that businesses need our support. This government and this council, under Conservative leadership, will support business. And just look what happened on Saturday. The parking was free in our car parks for Small Business Saturday, thanks to Councillor Mrs. Oselton. And we want to introduce free 30-minute parking in our top-of-the-town car parks going forward, providing businesses with even more support. On the specific issue of pay, rather than the misplaced premise of a failing economy, I must say we have some excellent officers here at Basingstoke and Dean, and those good people should be paid a good wage. The fact is, we don't pay anyone below the current living wage, but this should be voluntary on us and on business. The minimum wage at £6.31 provides protection for the lowest paid. That's why it was introduced. That's what it's there for. Quite rightly, some employers reward their employees a fair wage above this, as they and we see appropriate. Personally, I'm happy that this is the case here. It's interesting that in Labour-controlled Doncaster, the seat of Ed Miliband, the leader of the opposition, they agree with us. They don't pay the living wage. That's fine. It's up to them, and it should remain voluntary. On local authorities more broadly, though, once again, this motion is just plain wrong. It says that more than 80 local authorities have adopted the living wage. This isn't true. In fact, there are only 22 local authorities that have adopted it, or at least that's what the Living Wage Foundation says. 80 is actually the total number of employers across the whole of the public sector. It's all available online at the Living Wage website. The opposition say in their motion that this is a nationally agreed figure. I must ask by whom? Because from what I can see, it's a smattering of other local authorities that have signed up to it. The national figure is the minimum wage. Finally, Mr. Mayor, the fact is that the motion's missed the point, but don't worry, we're taking the right decisions anyway. We already pay people more, we'll continue to tax them less. It's as true with our council tax as it is with income tax, and between government and ourselves, we've saved people £3,000 since 2010. We're taking our economy forward, balancing our budget, we're putting our money into people's pocket, and we'll let them keep it.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, the principle of a living wage is quite simply sound. It's just, and it addresses one of the pressing issues that we do see in Basingstoke, which is low wages. We know that living costs are high, that fuel poverty is an issue, and that rents are high in Basingstoke and Dean, and that in certain living standards have fallen. But we can, if we choose to, show leadership. We can show commitment by backing the living wage. Now, it's great that no one directly employed by this council currently is paid less than the living wage. Let's embrace that positively. and commit to living wage going forward for all directly and indirectly employed staff. With the future that you propose for commissioning and the changing shape of our services that you're thinking about, we need to secure employee rights and paying conditions going forward. Looking outside the council in Basingstoke, we have a real issue with 0 hours contracts being used to exploit our young people. We have an issue with part-time contracts that in some cases are being used to exploit people. Now, it's our role to help shape the kind of economy we want looking forward. We want good employers who pay at least the living wage and offer good jobs that grow aspiration and living standards. And we should all want to tackle exploitation that reinforces poverty and poor working conditions, surely. In the 21st century, if we can't show our commitment to the living wage by recognising those employers, and I mean recognising those employers, not forcing anybody at all, recognising best practice in offering the living wage, not imposing it. Our slogan used to be pride in our place. Well, pride in Basingstoke is very much, I think, about dignity in work. The principle of what we're asking for is sound, and this motion has been adopted by Tory, Lib Dem and Labour councils like Winchester, Sutton and Nottingham. Even Boris, as Jack says, well, Boris Johnson has called on the government to adopt the living wages policy. Too many people are doing jobs which fall far short of providing an income that they can reasonably live on. That's reality. Far from being able to live independently, they often have to rely on benefits to top up their incomes. Someone said, Mr. Mayor, and I quote, "The living wage is an idea that has now been championed for over a decade, and some of the employers that were first to adopt it are increasingly becoming aware that it has much wider benefits. In the 21st century, no company should be profiting from the exploitation of its staff through paying of poverty wages. No local authority or public body should seek to balance its books in this way, let alone a government department." That's not just us calling for it, Mr. Mayor. Those aren't my words, but those of Lib Dems calling for the living wage too. This isn't party political. It's something quite simply that those see as the right way forward. If Tory councils like Winchester can adopt this, if Boris Johnson can champion it to government, if Lib Dems and Labour around the country can support it as a living wage, then it is quite something, I think. Basingstoke should be clear where we stand on this issue, Mr. Mayor. So I hope tonight members will support the motion and we can together send a very positive message from this chamber to the people of Basingstoke about our commitment to them. What we want to see in good jobs, yes. What we want to see in our economy, yes. Not forcing anybody, but celebrating best practice. And what's wrong with that? Let's celebrate the good businesses that are out there. Let's celebrate good public sector that is out there. And let's work together to achieve something I think that would be beneficial to many households in our borough. There is nothing controversial in this motion. There is nothing that anybody really can object to, because the principle of it is for us to examine this in Arga on our own issues and our own procurement and our own procedures, and through EPP Oscom to support our businesses and promote those, encourage those, recognise those. That's all, that have best practice in offering the living wage. What's wrong with that? What are you scared of?
Thank you. Councillor H.S., and I also I've got a long list here, but not everybody will have the opportunity to really speak on that because we got time limit of 20 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I suppose I really want to give my input, not just as a local councillor dealing with residents every day, but also as somebody involved in a local business. This council has an excellent reputation with local businesses. We do a lot to try and support them. The economic vibrancy of the town and the borough is fundamental to all of the things we do here. It's why we're putting in so much effort to the top of town, changing the street furniture, bringing in free parking and introducing short-term lets to people like Beacott to fill an empty shop, let alone major consultation on significant changes that could massively improve accessibility, open up the pedestrian zone, create event space and expand the market. It is also why we're so proud to have John Lewis and Waitrose on the way, and why we're investing so much money in Bays and View. This investment is all based on our support for local business. We know how important it is that they're here with us in this borough, giving jobs to local people and supporting our economy. So with all the work we're doing, with the great relationships we're building, why would we now want to send out a message that we take an arrogant view, that our way is best, and if you're not doing it our way, then we're not going to play ball with you? Businesses in the town are doing really well. Why change it now, and why try to tell them that we know best? The truth is we don't, and it's not up to us. It seems an odd way to describe it, but we have an incredible unemployment rate, just 1.9%, and that figure's from May. It doesn't even take account of the fact that demand for staff recently hit a 15-year peak. Why would we do something that would go any way to reversing any of those trends? I would like to see that unemployment rate decrease. I don't want to price people out of the market and see it increase. So why would we as a borough now demand that people pay more? To me, it makes no sense. We do have a minimum wage. It's set to make sure people can afford to live. That's what it's there for. It's a legal requirement, a statutory minimum. There is a net below which none may fall. Why should we be demanding that people meet an artificially created figure just because you've decided it sounds like a good idea? This borough has a significant retail offer. It's a key strategic sector for us. Festival Place advertised nationally now. It's part of our visitor economy, just like Highclere Castle or the Anvil. It's one of the reasons people come and visit us. They come to shop. That's a sector that usually pays minimum wage, like the bars and restaurant in this town that are the basis of us winning the Purple Flag Award. I know they pay minimum wage. It wasn't so long ago that I was working there and just glad to have the opportunity. If you start demanding more than that, then those opportunities will dry up and disappear. I simply don't want to see that happen. I also don't want to be seen as judging those retailers that come and invest in our town, that make it better and provide jobs to our residents, but can only afford to pay the minimum wage. That's okay, that's what it's there for. The motion requests that we recognise best practice of local employers who pay their employees the living wage. Who are we to say this is best practice? John Lewis and Waitrose are coming to this borough. They don't pay the living wage. Are we really saying that John Lewis don't meet best practice? This is a company that last year paid their staff a 17% bonus, but because they don't set a basic salary that meets your requirements, you don't deem them worthy. I don't want to alienate those companies. I want the borough to continue to be a place where new businesses can come, be supported by us and flourish. As they flourish, Basingstoke and Dean will too. So, Mr Mayor, I cannot support this motion. What I support is the right people getting the right wage in a thriving borough with a vibrant economy. I support businesses employing people, giving them the opportunity to work. I support businesses having the opportunity to grow here with our support to make the borough a better place.
Sir, now we got 3 minutes. Councillor Keating, you got only 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is sad and disappointing to hear people saying we should do nothing to increase the value of the wages that people earn in this borough, in this town. It is very sad and it is very disappointing. Household debt is hugely increased. The incidence of 0-hour contracts has hugely increased in the last 5 years. We've now got people earning the minimum weekly hourly rate, but only getting the minimum hours also. There is no minimum hourly numbers that you have to get. So people are now being asked to work for 10, 5, 0 or 15 hours. It's not the minimum wage that is causing them a difficulty, it's the 0 hours contracts. Let me just say, low wages, be it the minimum wages or not, is essentially currently subsidized in this country by benefits. Benefits top up the earnings of lots of people who actually earn more than the minimum wage because they have greater responsibilities or larger families. They are subsidized by the taxpayer instead of getting proper wages. Low wages is an absolute dread for people in the working class. Not hard-working people or all these other rubbish statements of the Prime Minister. The reality is low wages is a real problem for them.
1 minute.
Construct that with 0 hours and they're in real trouble. I've heard many times over the last 5 years the dross that comes across this floor about blaming the recession caused by the Labour government. Let me tell you, the Labour government was not in power in America or the whole of Europe. The recession was worldwide and caused by banks.
30 seconds.
Support the motion.
There is 22 seconds. Anybody wish to speak for 22? Councillor James?
I'm supporting the motion.
Councillor Lake? 4 seconds.
I'm opposing the motion. What we need is better education, educational aspiration and achievement leading to proper jobs and proper skills.
Time. Councillor Cousin, would... Thank you. Councillor Cousin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To be honest, that was kind of the response I was expecting. And it is disappointing that that's the outcome that I was expecting. Because we're seeing councils up and down the country of varying parties taking the lead, that we then can't, or the administration don't want to take that lead. I just want to pick up on a few things that were said in the chamber. The first thing was the mention of John Lewis, and the quote of John Lewis don't pay the minimum wage. Well, they're currently at the moment going through a public consultation as to whether they will implement the living wage, and the signs are that they're going to implement it. So is that just a slap in the face to John Lewis and Waitrose, who are looking to set up in our town? You know, we want to do business with them because they have the same values that we have. We want to be the best. We want to have good rates of pay for a good day's work. That comment, just incredible. That's the element, and that's the audacity and the nature of that councillor. 0-hour contracts were mentioned, part-time hours were mentioned, low pay were mentioned. Yes, and the Deputy Leader, it was nice to see him get ready for his role in Parliament, potentially, if he gets elected, and calling for the Speaker, in your case, Mr. Mayor, to come and help him from a bit of barracking. But the whole point is that we want people to have a fair day's rate of work, and the 0 hours contract is a big part of this puzzle. The living wage will help counteract some of that element. And Councillor Izzet also mentioned the impact this would have on invitations to tender for contractors. What we're asking through ARGA is that it's done through reference with them to see how it could be implemented. We're not saying do it, we're saying how can we implement this? We believe, and as we've seen, we in turn, we don't pay anybody, with the exception of apprentices, less than the living wage. So how can we reflect that back with people who are inviting here, who are looking to come and work with us? That's what we want to try and achieve. Mr. Mayor, the recorded vote has been called for, and I was also going to ask for that as well. I hope that we can find some collectivity here, and that we can unite behind the fact that we believe that our residents should be paid a living wage. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Executive, we got recorded vote.
Thank you. 4 against, abstain. Councillor Mrs Baker. Thank you. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Miss Bean. Councillor Bierman. Councillor Bound. Councillor Mrs Burgess. Councillor Miss Cherrett. Councillor Mrs Court. Councillor Cousins. Councillor Mrs Cubitt. Councillor Donnell. Councillor Mazichus, Councillor Finney, Councillor Mrs Frankham, Councillor Frankham, Councillor Gardner, Councillor Godson, Councillor Golding, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Hood, Councillor Hussey, Councillor Isaac, Councillor Ms James, Councillor James, Councillor Joe Wardner, Councillor Jones, Councillor Keating, Councillor Leake, Councillor Leeks, Councillor Marks, Councillor Miller, Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Musson, Councillor Mrs Ossleton, Councillor Parker, Councillor Potter, Councillor Putty? Abstain. Councillor Reagan? 4. Yep. Councillor Round? Councillor Raffel? Councillor Sanders? Councillor Shaw? Councillor Sherlock? Councillor Mrs Still? Councillor Mrs Taylor? Councillor Tilbury? Councillor Tomlin? Councillor Mrs Tucker? Councillor Miss Washbourne? Councillor Gary Watts? Councillor Keith Watts? Councillor Miss Wardridge? Thank you. Yep, you agree the same. Yeah. Mr Mayor, 424 against 25, abstain 3.
Right, that's lost. Now we come to item 2, 5-year land supply and the local plan. Councillor David Potter.
Good evening, Mr Mayor. Thank you. I'm sure members throughout the chamber see this as an uncontroversial motion. In moving the motion, let me say first of all what it's not about. It's not about giving the administration a kicking, metaphorically that is, in respect of the draft local plan. Tempting though that may be, the plan's shortcomings are plain to see in any case. Our extended consultation process, which will take us into 2015 and beyond, speaks for itself. Of course, some of this is caused, in my view, by the late changes made by the portfolio holder, and we are still likely to fall foul of the inspector and have the plan thrown out. The plan could go down in history as the local plan that irreparably damaged Basingstoke and Dean for years to come. It's also not about accusing the portfolio holder of acting unlawfully, but this council was found to have done so by the High Court over Manidown, and we were apparently so concerned at our continuing vulnerability on these matters that the Chief Executive saw fit to seek further legal advice around our submissions as a landowner for Manidown under the local plan. Regarding the motion itself, let me put on record that I was approached by members opposite about the prospect of this type of motion being put to council, but it never materialised from that side, hence my initiative. Members of the Development Control Committee, who were with me last evening at a meeting which went on just before midnight, considering the Razors Farm application, would hopefully join with me in saying that we have got to get our act together to protect the council and its residents from the predatory bids of developers which are coming at us thick and fast. Incidentally, the application was refused by all members of the committee last night. By the way, if any member has it in mind to say that this motion will encourage developers to try their luck and bring forward their applications prematurely, I say to them, don't kid yourself. If you really think the developers aren't aware of the situation we are in, you are wrong. We all care about the borough, the whole of the borough, and we want our communities to be able to avoid... Sorry.
Can I have telephone switch off, please? Thank you.
I forgive you, Paul. It's okay. We all care about the borough, the whole of the borough, and we want our communities to be able to avoid uncontrolled, large-scale housing development. But we also want to provide sustainable housing, the right sort of housing, including social housing in the right places for the benefit of existing and future residents of Basingstoke and Dean. How can we do this? We can work with Cabinet, you'll be surprised to hear this, on a cross-party basis, whilst recognising Cabinet has the primary executive responsibility to identify sustainable sites for housing beyond those already identified. This could, for example, even include identifying sites south of the motorway and without the use of compulsory purchase orders. There are landowners who have land for sale more suitable than some of the sites in the draft local plan. We need to accelerate the master planning of Manidown with a view to a much earlier delivery of housing. Mind you, this would require a certain county councillor and one or two members of this council to be told to cease their irresponsible undermining of the Manidown project for political advantage and instead recognise the responsibility they have to the whole of the borough. We also need to be more imaginative in the way that officer reports to the DC are constructed. I'm not going to mention Manidown again, Councillor Jones. I know officers for whom I have the highest regard, by the way, find themselves in an invidious position because of our vulnerability over the draft local plan and the lack of a 5-year housing land supply. But we're not alone in this as a council. Most worryingly, perhaps, is a recent decision under Cotswold District Council versus the Secretary of State, where the judge considered the issue of persistent under-delivery of housing. In simple terms, the judge ruled, as I understand it, that the targets as set out in the local plan should be raised to compensate for this under-delivery. This was a 20% uplift. Time is of the essence. Please support this motion and accept it in the spirit of qualified support from the Labour Group. Refer it to Cabinet for its urgent evaluation and action. I move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With this motion, we just basically want to highlight the concern that so many people are feeling in the borough about the sense of powerlessness in development control. The local plan, Mr. Mayor, has been pushed back another 7 months because, amongst other representations, the Cabinet got it wrong on Manidown. It got it wrong in such a way that the Council had to seek legal advice on its own proposed Manidown policy, and the advice exposed the July decision taken in this chamber. That's not a criticism of anyone, that's just a simple fact of what happened, and we've got to deal with that. Because of the local plan timetable slipping, we're left more vulnerable than ever to premature and opportunist planning applications by developers who see the window and wish to exploit it. And members on all sides of this chamber want to see us navigate out of this situation. But what it feels like now, Mr. Mayor, is that DC are left trying to pick up the pieces of each application with one arm tied behind their back. Half of all the proposed local plan allocated sites are coming through the system and heading for DC. So far, those that have been presented to DC have had huge problems with them as applications. They're not good applications at all. This is the way that developers, or there is a way that developers should be working with us in Basingstoke to bring forward development that's well planned, that meets our community's expectations, that should offer the best that the industry can deliver in holistic plans, not a conveyor belt of house building and soulless estates. But this window of opportunity is bringing out the very worst of the industry, and the legacy of bad housing will affect this borough and poor infrastructure, and it's something we're all going to live to regret if we don't get it sorted and we don't get it dealt with in the way that we feel we can. Because DC are caught between a rock and a hard place on these applications because of the land supply problem. The more that we get, the more these sites that get permission by any route outside of the local plan, the bigger the problem we see created. Because the delivery of housing and permissions will be stacked up on sites at the beginning of the plan period, leaving us little room for manoeuvre later on, other than to be forced to find more land to keep the supply going later on. It feels like it's open season on Basingstoke at the moment, and our communities are in the firing line. So we're asking for action, really, to tackle the development industry itself in Basingstoke, not to allow them to go ahead with where they are tackling the issue at the moment. We need to change the way we see development reports written, and we need to see that all avenues are explored to help alleviate the pressure. There are things that we can be doing and should be doing collectively in cooperation. Now, I remember the years of being chided for the supposedly top-down planning system. Currently, Eric Pickles is saying yes to any and everything. And the quality of each proposal doesn't appear to be relevant to the overriding political imperative from the government at the moment to simply get permissions on the books. It feels like a free-for-all, and in many other parts of the country it is. And the inspectors have been given their instructions: approve, 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 regardless of your land supply. There was one council at a 4.8, 4.9 year land supply. It still got clobbered at appeal. At the moment, it is literally left to the developers and the inspectors to decide where and what development happens in Basingstoke. So look, I hope members will support the motion tonight. I've seen too many members, I'm sure we all have, seen too many members of the public come to our meetings, hold their heads in frustration, anger in some cases, and in sorrow at the whole mess, really. Don't fiddle while Rome burns was the phrase that came to mind, really, when I was thinking of the motion. We need to bridge the timeline, to give Mark the time he needs as the planning portfolio holder to change his proposals in his local plan in the way he needs, to help give our communities breathing space also, and to deal with the issue of predatory developers, because they are seeking to exploit our borough, and we should be doing all we can, and I'm sure we will do all we can, to deal with them in the best way we can. Please support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I find myself puzzled, indeed baffled. The movers of the motion speak eloquently and say a lot of positive as well as some very negative things. But what we're asked to vote on is the words of the motion. In the words of the motion, I see absolutely no recommendations for any action of any kind whatsoever. We're asked to note concern, note concern, and note concern, and note concern. Well, we all share, I think, very similar concerns. However, the words of the motion make absolutely no suggestions or recommendations of any kind as to what we should be doing for our residents, or indeed what we should do as a council to address this month's motion. However, unfortunately, it goes further than that by saying that Development Control Committee has become increasingly irrelevant. By saying that in a motion in this council, they directly undermine the interests of the residents that they tell us that they and we care for, and of course we do. The member speaking spoke about last evening's Development Control Committee meeting, at which 2 parish councils, 4 ward members, the representative of a major international business, and representatives of several hundred residents came and spoke at a meeting convened on one of the very applications the motion is concerned about. And the room was filled with residents who'd come to listen. The 2 councillors who moved the motion were members of the committee. One of them substituted onto the committee, I assume on a voluntary basis. There was no indication that he'd been brought kicking and screaming to the table. And the committee did indeed end after 11 o'clock because we spent our whole time and focus on the one application, and we listened carefully to what everybody who came to talk to us had to say. The members who brought this motion were actually amongst the most active and engaged participants in that meeting, diligently questioning visiting speakers, questioning the officers, raising significant issues in debate, actively supporting the committee in its efforts to make its conclusions as strong and robust as possible. Indeed, once or twice as chairman, I even found it necessary to intervene to curb members' enthusiasm when it went slightly off the usual topic, the real proper topic. But this evening, in the motion, whatever they may say in their speech, in the motion, they tell us and the public that all this effort was irrelevant. I believe the other members who were there, the parish councillors and the residents, greatly valued the positive contributions from these 2 members. I believe their efforts, along with the other members, will greatly strengthen both our officers and the parish councils and the other objectors when they make submissions and speak at appeal. As well as the pros and cons of the application, the committee put a lot of time and effort into considering aspects of new evidence that could strengthen that case, evidence that only emerged from visiting speakers and from committee members in the meeting. And now the motion says all that is a waste of time and effort. If supported in council, I think I probably support what they may have intended to say, that if we support the words of the motion, the effect of that is to discourage members, parishes and committees from making any effort to consider in depth the pros and cons of an application, because we're told our efforts would be irrelevant. Why turn up at the meeting? Mr. Mayor, we may make appeals, we may lose appeals, but I totally reject the proposition that any appeal is a foregone conclusion. Certainly if members of DC were to dissipate their time and efforts whinging about the state of affairs instead of focusing very sharply, as we did last night, on the job in hand,
they would be setting our officers an impossible task in defending our decisions and would create the very problem the motion complains about. I think we all share the concerns raised in the last two paragraphs of the motion, though what positive good it does for the Council to note these concerns without any vestige of positive propositions completely escapes me. But the motion also wants us to note concern about how officers are shaping their reports and the information they put before the committee regarding the weight or otherwise being given to particular matters at appeal. Mr. Mayor, it's vital, and I make no apologies for using that word, it's vital that officers tell us the plain facts about what's happening in appeals across the country and give us their unvarnished specialist opinion on the extent to which a particular aspect will or will not carry weight if the Council or its members start telling the officers what to do and they don't want to hear what they do and don't want to hear and what views officers should or shouldn't express. It will undermine the whole of our development control process. Whatever the intention, we must vote against this motion.
Councillor James. Gavin James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can assure you my speech for the last debate was better, and you didn't get a chance to hear it fully, but I will put it on my blog for you to read later. In terms of this motion, I'm not sure why this motion was moved, and even more shocked that it's Labour that moved it, given their shameful record on housing. The motion rightly highlights the delays in putting together the local plan. Sadly, too many saw the local plan as an opportunity to score points and put their short-term political careers ahead of the future of our borough. It was that caused delays. The evidence was clear several years ago. The minimum need was around 750 a year. The feedback from residents was clear, a fear of overdevelopment. I'm proud that the Liberal Democrats listened to our number Our number was based on the evidence, and it was influenced by public opinion. Compare that to Labour's records due to their weak leadership. They never stated a number. They never took a view on the evidence. They never reacted to the resident survey. They appeared to oppose every site and every development. They even opposed the development of a long-term empty home. And when the Tories finally had a local plan draft for consultation, they opposed that too. We know that consultation has highlighted issues, and I'm confident our officers can offer us solutions to those issues. But that's the point in a consultation. We only found out those issues because we had the consultation that Labour tried to block. They say they want 50% affordable homes, but have not supported any. 50% of zero amounts to a whole lot of nothing, and that's exactly what Labour have contributed to the housing debate and houses crisis. Absolutely nothing. The Labour group have clearly been manipulated to put their PPC's prospects in 2015 ahead of the long-term future of our borough. I fear this motion is motivated not by a desire to progress the local plan, but instead to wave the unlawful stick of many down to cause embarrassment and make new opportunities to criticise officers rather than make progress. Just as some Conservatives used many down to further their careers at great expense to the taxpayer, we now see Labour doing exactly the same, causing many of the appeals that will cost even more. If Labour's leadership want to play political games on such a serious issue, then they can play on their own, and I will abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Raphael.
Mr. Mayor, we must remain focused on what we want to achieve. We want to achieve a plan that sets out the right level of housing for our borough for the immediate future. We want that plan to be judged as sound when it is examined in detail. It's important that we remember that we are at a place that we were always going to be in. We have consulted, we have a duty to respond to what the consultees have said, or face challenges and surprises at the examination stage for failing to do so. Some of the consultees have made comments that were anticipated and predictable and can easily be dealt with. Others have made comments that could not have been anticipated, and some of these comments have been made because they have misunderstood the plan. They have needed explanations from us, and we need to replace ambiguity with clarity. And thus it was with the many-down site policy. I added the desire of all councillors at P&I that the site policy should contain a reference to a north-south relief road. The drafting was misunderstood, and the landowner thought that we meant a dual carriageway through the middle of the site, and thought that this made the policy and the plan unlawful, as it would have substantially constrained the amount of housing on the site. I've made it clear that it is a road around the edge and possibly over a corner of the site by the railway, which is what we wanted at P&I. I anticipate the objection will now be withdrawn once the policy is redrafted to clarify this. Now, quite properly, Councillor Potter, as an opposition councillor, explored what was causing the landowner to use the word unlawful. He was given the explanation and has seen advice that nothing that we have currently done was unlawful, and indeed nothing is potentially unlawful provided we clarify and give reasons for our intentions. Yet there is this line in this motion about the many down policy may still be unlawful. A line peddled out by Councillor Harvey at Cabinet last week and again tonight. It is untrue, Mr. Mayor, and I have to say both those Labour councillors know that it's untrue. Mr. Mayor, I want our plan to get to the examination stage as quickly as possible, but many of the answers to the questions raised will not be ready until January, simply because we've had to go back to experts and some of the consultees with explanations and clarifications to see whether their objections remain. Thereafter, we'll have to deal with a site selection and discuss site policies at committee, and there will be consideration of a draft infrastructure delivery plan as a result of the new site selection. This will take place in February. Then the draft plan will go to Cabinet and then back to full council, all in March, and then there is 6 weeks for consultation. Unfortunately, it's impossible to agree everything and consult before the PERDA period starts on the 11th of April. We would have had to have agreed everything by the end of January for that to have happened. However, I'm not content that we should do absolutely nothing during PERDA simply because that is always what happens. PERDA is our observation of a period where the Council does not promote or publicise any issue that may put a candidate or party during the immediate pre-election period at an advantage or a disadvantage. It's designed to protect the principle of free and fair elections. So if we consulted, the challenge would be that an election result was unfair, not a challenge to the plan. Hence, I've asked for us to obtain legal advice as to whether a consultation on a local plan can take place immediately after or during the period after April the 11th without risking unfairness to an election. Such advice will come to me. I'll bring it to P&I, and if there's a positive recommendation from P&I, then I'll either come back to full council in February or the full council that discusses the draft plan at the end of March, as a decision either needs to be made on when the consultation period starts. Mr. Mayor, I want to come back to our task in hand. I want to thank those councillors who voted positively for the draft local plan to go to consultation in July. I thanked all councillors then for their constructive assistance without reservation. And I was, like all councillors, disappointed by the Labour Party's vote against this plan, despite listening to them and adjusting the plan accordingly in the weeks prior to that July meeting. As I've said throughout this process, it's vitally important that this plan has the broad support of the Council, that we have all shaped it and all influenced it, as we will all have to live and work with it, regardless of who controls the Council. Sticking with one's head in the sand is not an option. Likewise, it is obvious to all of us that the issues that we have to wrestle with are complex and require compromise and cooperation. So I challenge the proposer and seconder and the Labour Party to remove the unlawful sentence. It is their false accusation now. Otherwise, they'll be vulnerable to the claim that Labour doesn't want a local plan or Labour tries to stop the local plan by fair means or foul. And this sentence is most definitely foul. If they refuse now, in front of us, to withdraw that sentence, then I urge the sensible majority who'd voted for the draft local plan to vote against this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Keith Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, much of what I was planning to say has been said. I was quite impressed by the speeches, particularly Councillor Potter, who of course has been recycled since much of the early stages of this awful planning process took place. A bit of cynicism in Councillor Harvey's, I would say. But as has been said, very little of what they said has to do with what's in the motion. The motion invites us to note several concerns that we've known about for quite a long time, and to ask the candidate, the cabinet, to give the urgent evaluation. Now, the last word in Councillor Potter's speech was action, but again, as has been said, there's no action called for in this motion at all. But we do have concern. The Planning Inspectorate made it clear over a year ago that the failure to have a 5-year land supply, and that would include any case where there wasn't a local plan, would be considered a justification for refusal of planning consent for sustainable development, except where there are special circumstances affecting a site. Now, I've got a lot of empathy with the Development Control Committee, and I think it's absolutely certain that they should be exercising their judgment on every plan as usual, and that if it's necessary to go to appeal, we should support that, because we do have cases where that exception should apply because of the specific nature of the site. But this motion refers to significant issues emerging from the consultation. Well, we know that, and we also know that many of the people contributing to that consultation are landowners or developers or planning consultants with an interest in what they're saying. I wasn't happy with the report that came to the recent P&I Ofcom, and I think that that was a result perhaps of too much urgency and not enough evaluation. But we now have a programme set up when we're going to be able to resolve that, and I hope that what's being said today is that the Labour group are going to join the party, because in July, as has been said, without any sort of specific collusion, a group of people came together, what I call the coalition of the grown-ups, to say we must have a local plan, and we voted for consultation for a draft local plan that we knew wasn't perfect. And what did the movers of this motion do? Did they put forward an alternative local plan? No, they voted against it. So they voted against the only local plan in town, and now they're lamenting that we have all these problems. And that's what this motion is. It's a lament. It doesn't call for any action. There's no indication of how we could measure the success or failure of the motion if it was carried or passed. So I'm going to appeal to the movers of the motion and their colleagues here. Come and join the party. I don't mean the party with a big P. We can together make things better with the local plan. I am extremely alarmed. I mean, it is going to be extremely difficult because Basingstoke-on-Dean's been assailed by rapacious developers who've looked for chinks and weaknesses, and in fact areas where the plan's been out of date.
1 minute.
But I also think that this is a complete waste of time, can I say. I mean, there have been some very interesting speeches, but I frankly have something better to do than continue to sit here, and I'd like to propose to move, in accordance with Standing Order 3.1411D, I move that the Council proceeds to the next business.
Thank you. All right. What about? You haven't got time.
Well, no, you've been put. You have to put it to tender.
Yeah. Well, that's been called for. Vote to be put.
Yeah.
Is that agreed?
Sorry, can we just clarify?
Yes.
It's next business I've moved, Chairman. There's no need for a vote.
Can you please refer to the constitutional point and then?
Yes, it's paragraph 3.14, sub-paragraph 11.
Right, please. Say it again, please.
Sorry, yes. Paragraph 3.14, sub-paragraph 11, sub-paragraph D. A motion can be moved at any time. The Council proceeds to the next business. Oh, good. Thank you to my assistant on the left.
Councillor Watt.
Mr. Mayor, applies to notices of motion because it clearly applies to the ordinary motions, but the standing orders from notice of motions are at 3.16.
We just need a couple of minutes to refer to that one. Okay, order please. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Rafael was quite right to draw a distinction between notices of motion and general rules of debate. But our view is that we are actually at a point where we are under the general rules of debate, and therefore Councillor Watts is entitled, as he has done, to put to Council that we move to the next business. At a point where that has been put, there is no room for further debate. That has to go to the vote. So, Mr. Mayor, you are obliged under the general rules of debate to put to the vote that the Council moves to the next business.
Right. Can I put that the Council move to the next business? And can we have a vote, please? Agreed?
Put it to vote. 4 against, Mr.
Yeah.
4 against.
Can we have a show of hand for?
I'll count those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Mr. Mayor,
Can we have an order? Can we have order, please?
Mr. Mayor, hands went up and down during the course of us counting, so it is not helpful. I really would ask if members could clearly keep their hands in the air while we count, and please don't put your hand up halfway through. Thank you. So if we could start from now, please. Those 4.
So 4, please.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And those
against? Chief Executive.
Mr. Mayor, I'm seriously going to just disallow one because the same thing happened. So it's 25 for and 18 against.
That's carried.
Move to the next business.
Now we move to the next business.
Mr. Mayor. Councillor Potter.
Councillor Potter.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know whether you'd allow this under a point of order, but obviously if I could just express my disappointment in regard to the proposal that was made and carried, bona fide point of order, by the way, and dealt with entirely correctly. But, hypocrisy is not a word that I'd use very often, but I do notice elected members opposite voting in support of the curtailment of the debate, those who have actually spoken to me about the necessity of such a motion. We on our side will learn lessons from this, and certainly if that's the way the Council wants to proceed in the future, in the way that they deal with things that they disagree with, we'll take note of that and we will respond accordingly.
Okay, Councillor Potter. Thank you. Well, councillors, we move to the next item now. Sorry? What over there? Anything?
Move on, Mr. Mayor.
Well, item 13. Question to the Mayor, Councillor Shaw and Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a question to the Cabinet Member for Strategy. In the light of the views of local residents and ward councillors, does the portfolio holder agree that Saunders Field, a site of significant biodiversity, and the springs of the River Loddon should be maintained as such and should be accessible to the general public. And Councillor Keating will ask the supplementary.
Thank you. Councillor Jayawardena.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank the members for this question. The administration has taken the decision to begin the regeneration of the leisure park. I think this is an important step because I'd hope that members on all sides agree that the leisure park needs investment. It needs to be taken forward to make sure it's a good place for people of our borough and beyond to come and enjoy themselves and ensure that their families can have a great day out. Improvements are already beginning to appear. We've seen air kicks come to this leisure park, which has attracted people from Bournemouth, Bristol, London and beyond, and that's really good for Basingstoke. As Councillor Masichis talked about Festival Place advertising nationally in terms of our shopping offer, this indeed ensures that our leisure offer is also recognised further afield than here in Basingstoke and Dean. We're in the process of seeking a development partner, and I know members of the leisure park MAP will be aware of this and the progress that's been made in that direction. I think that's an important step to ensure we're getting the right private expertise into taking the leisure park forward, as we've done on Basing View. But at the same time, because we're so early on in the regeneration, it's important that we're retaining flexibility to ensure we're able to take the right decisions at the right time in the future. I've said before, and I'll say again, we will deal with Saundersfield in a sensitive manner. It is an important site for our borough, and we will deal with it sensitively. However, it's right at this point to retain flexibility as to what that exactly means, what that means for the wider leisure park, and how we ensure that the whole of the leisure park site is used in the best interest of the residents of Basingstoke and Dean.
Thank you. Councillor Keating, supplementary.
The supplementary I had prepared was on the basis that he would actually answer the question. But you've obviously haven't. The issue basically is, will you give an undertaking to provide and ensure the biodiversity arena of Saundersfield is actually protected? You will do something about it. That's the question. Supplementary.
Mr. Mayor, I did answer the question. I'm very pleased to repeat what I said, that we'll deal with Saundersfield in a sensitive manner. And it's important we're dealing with Saundersfield in a sensitive manner. I'll repeat that again, in a sensitive manner, and it's about the biodiversity of the area. It's interesting, of course, that members opposite seem to want to lock Saundersfield down as to what it is today, because indeed it could be improved. We can improve the nature of that site, and that would be a healthy step, I'd argue, for Saundersfield. Who knows what's ahead? It's important we're retaining flexibility at this moment in time. I've said what I've said before, I've said it again today, and I repeat it again right now. We will retain flexibility, but we'll deal with Saundersfield in a sensitive manner.
Thank you. Item 14. To receive our block the minutes for report, we have, unless anyone has got any questions, but they have to refer to which part of the Councillor Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I refer to, let me put my glasses on, Health and Housing Environment meeting of the 17th of October. Questions on page about 4382. I hope there's a question to Mrs. Austin, the Cabinet member. It's about independent living of the elderly. Does the Cabinet member recognise that a requirement for independent living for the elderly is a regular, reliable, frequent bus service? Will the Cabinet member therefore contact Stagecoach and try and prevent them from cutting the Jazz Free and the number 4 bus on a Sunday service from the Berg Estate in my ward? This will leave many elderly people, if the cuts go ahead, without a bus service.
Yeah. Councillor Marks? Should be to the chairman of the committee. Yeah. Chairman of the committee.
Mr. Mayor, I will take this if you require. Could you please clarify where on page 4382 you were referring to? So I've got page 4382 open, which I believe is what you stated.
I haven't got my large print version here with me. If somebody could help me with the page. Start with the page. Comment from Councillor Harvey to the committee. Transfer and independent living. 4382.
4382, Councillor Maher.
Mr. Mayor, I have page open and I'm just reading it now. He advised it was concerned about the impact of the standard level of care. A question from Councillor Paul Harvey. Right. These are the minutes. This is what happened. I'm not quite sure what more you want me to say.
Just a minute. Councillor Regan, Councillor Regan, Councillor Regan, please sit down. Now, Councillor Mark.
I'm struggling to find where the bus service is mentioned.
So it is no. Councillor Regan.
Absolutely outrageous.
Councillor Regan, please sit down. Councillor Regan, please sit down. Yes. No, that's it. That's been dealt with. Now, if you really, I just don't want to carry on with that. So, any other? Councillor Mrs. Cubitt. Councillor Mrs. Cubitt.
Yes, I'd like to address the question on planning and infrastructure minutes of the 14th of November to the chairman, Councillor Miller. It's not what was agreed, page 4421. I watched the web this afternoon just to double check, and I know I'm 100% correct in stating that you undertook at the end of the meeting to permit an appendix covering all the comments made by members that attended the meeting on this paper B, and the comments that of the attendees and the members are not in an appendix, and therefore this is not what you agreed. And it also doesn't follow the rules, the new rules of the minutes, where, for example, in this meeting we had Karen Brimacombe, and normally a summing up is supposed to take place, and a summing up did not take place. So at the moment, as it stands, these minutes do not conform with the correct procedures of our new minute taking, and also you haven't done what you undertook to do at the end of the meeting.
Question.
The question is that this is not an accurate reflection. Can he please resubmit these minutes correctly as opposed to incorrect?
Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I sort of anticipated that this question was coming along from committee services, and the webcast was re-examined by committee services, and the actual words that I used, and in consultation with Mr. Brimacombe, was a summary of the individual comments will be in the minutes. You also commented, and it's my voice speaking, that...
Do not interrupt. Let him answer.
I enclose an email that was sent by, from one of the directors, Laura Taylor, about the re-styled minutes that we agreed back, I believe it was in May, 31st of May. The narrative will capture the essence of the debate and will therefore vary in length and detail, but it will not detail every individual contribution, as it is not intended to be a verbatim record of the debate. And that I quote from the email. There will be comments included, this is why the word summary is used, as the comments of the committee and not comments of individuals. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Supplementary only, please.
Supplementary is that there was almost unanimous agreement on the part of the members that the members would like to receive a full report from the consultees of the consultation. That was agreed by Councillors Mitchell, Councillor Leek from the Labour Party, from the Liberal Democrats, and that's not referred to at all in the minutes. So, A, I don't accept your rendition of what you said at the end of the meeting, because I've watched the webcast and you did say a summary in an appendix. You've left out the word appendix. And B, there is a glaring omission here. We all unanimously stated that we would like to receive a copy of the consultation responses from the consultees, and it's not in this report minutes.
Final answer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, that was examined to see whether there was a possibility of providing those comments from the consultation. A copy of those comments was provided in the reception of Parklands. The advice that we've been given is that we could not reproduce the redacted comments because under the Data Protection Act we cannot release the name of the persons submitting the comments under the consultation, neither can we release the signatures which some of them provided under their comments. The workload to be able to do that for 1,300 responses was decided to be unacceptable. That is being looked at again, and the directors will be looking at this on Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
just-
No, that's finished. Last
But
question.
we're not having a debate about the meeting, we're having a debate about the minutes, and it's a reflection of what was discussed at the meeting, not what the chairman agreed subsequently.
Councillor Cubitt, it is not a debate. Thank you. Now, there's nobody else, so Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cabinet, 29th October, page 4392, the key decision of the forward plan, read the council plan and the medium-term financial strategy. Can I ask the Cabinet member, Councillor Usselton, in regard to the council plan and the medium-term financial strategy and the commitments that we have regarding public transport, will she address the issues raised by my colleague Councillor Regan, Councillor Keating and Councillor Watts with regard to the cuts in public transport the Burgh Estate are now suffering? And I would invite her to meet with those board members to raise that issue with them, because it is an issue that's pressing. It relates to our council plan, it relates to our policies on public transport, and it relates to our support financially for public transport in our borough.
Councillor Usselton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is it on? Yes, thank you. We will address. I heard what happened yesterday. I was present at the meeting. It is switched on. I am.
Yes, it is on.
We called. Fine. We called. Excuse me. Be quiet.
Would you please
We
be
called
quiet?
a meeting this afternoon with the ward councillors, Stagecoach and our officers. We are again meeting. Stagecoach have listened to what has been said. They're going away and we're having another meeting on Tuesday, and then you will hear. So we can't be any quicker than that.
Suzanne, no supplementary. Please, that's it. That's the end of the questions. Now, we take it on block, thank you. No, you go. Yeah. So, now we come to item 16. Can we have some order, please?
Just double check whether any members wish to raise any.
Now, on this item, can I ask if any members wish to raise any question, any matter on the confidential side? Silawat.
Well, should we not be going into confidential session before I do that?
Well, do you want?
Do you want for us to go in confidential?
I do, yes.
That has to be moved and seconded.
Well, I move that we go into confidential session to discuss tomorrow's refurbishment.
So that's been moved and seconded, and I'll put it to the vote. All for? No. Against? How many? There was
distracted by this. Do you have a point to make?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I believe that this doesn't need to be voted on. If a member wishes to discuss something in light of the Local Government Act provisions, then that's permitted.
Okay, so now that been requested to move this session in the confidential where there are exempt information is likely to be disclosed. Therefore, I'll ask the public to leave the chamber. And I'd like to thank you, Mrs. Staplin. Yes. And wish you a Merry Christmas. Thank you very much.